Hello, greetings, Radically for Jesus here. I wanted to film a video that talks about if you suspect your child is dyslexic, who do you see for an evaluation? I've got my notes here to the side, so if I keep glancing that way, that's why. The first one that a lot of times you'll see suggested in groups is to see your local Scottish Rite. That's something run by the Masons. And I know some people have some feelings about that one way or the other on the religious side, but you choose accordingly. But quite often they will either run tutoring services or evaluations, and that's something you can look into to see, do they offer that in your area. Back when we lived in Columbus, Ohio, they did not. They did free tutoring, but it was by a wait list and by financial need based. The evaluations they did not offer. Some of them do, so I'm told. So that's something you could potentially look into if you're comfortable with that. Another is, and the most common route is probably by going to your doctor or pediatrician and then explaining your difficulties and telling them what the struggles are, and they may or may not recommend that and give you a referral to see a child neuropsychologist. I know that sounds like, whoa, I don't know if I need to go that far, but that's basically who does the diagnoses for learning disorders or reading disabilities, things of that nature. Not anything too freaky or uncommon. It is unfortunately very expensive, so I'm told. We did not go that route. I am told it's in the neighborhood of $1,500-$1,600, and could be more, could be less, depending on where you live and the going rates. The unfortunate part is quite often your medical insurance won't cover it. The reason being is it's not a medically treatable condition. So there's a few people who have had success having it covered, but not many from what I see in the groups. The next major avenue is the one that our family chose. Check with your college or universities that are within a driving distance. You may have to drive an hour or two depending on where you live, but sometimes it's really worth it. In our case, back when we were living in Columbus, Ohio, we were very near Ohio State University, and they offer a speech and hearing clinic. And at that clinic, they have the students do evaluations and tutoring and things of that nature. And that is a low cost or free service depending on what you're having done. Back at the time when we did it, I can only speak to that, they had the evaluations for free. And they did two types. One that was more of a reading disorder type and one that was more speech based. But both of our kids had some evaluations there, and we've seen both types, and I thought they were excellent. They were really sweet people too. So I totally recommend, if you're living in that area, calling them. You probably have to get on a waiting list, but it's free, who cares? Now when they go to do the tutoring, if you choose to do it after a diagnosis, if you're diagnosed, the tutoring is not free, but it is very low cost. They can do tutoring or the speech therapy. And if you're going to go to speech therapy, that's a much cheaper route than other routes of speech therapy. Much cheaper. It's like $100 per semester. Way cheaper than a lot of doctor's visits, from what I understand. And they'll do it 1 to 2 times a week, depending on recommendation. And they're pretty good at it. I picked up a lot. We chose to do it for a little while, and I learned from it. And then from there, I decided to continue at home. I didn't feel like there was anything that they were doing that I couldn't do at home. But I'm glad that I have the experience, and I totally recommend it, at very least for that semester, so you can learn from it. The next avenue is a lot of learning centers will do a certain evaluation, though admittedly, I have no experience with this particular avenue, and I am very skeptical. The reason why is I've kind of figured a lot of them have too much to gain financially to be really give an unbiased opinion of your child, and more than likely they're going to give an opinion that's very biased toward their solution only, whether it be I don't really want to name names, but the kind of places I have in mind are like Sylvan Learning Centers and things of that nature. I don't know anything about them. I'm not used to them. They could be wonderful, but I've seen other people in groups complain a lot that the type of evaluation that they got from those sort of places was not very thorough, and they ended up going and getting an additional one done at a child neuropsychologist or something of that nature. Another option is to see a speech pathologist, someone who's licensed in that and experienced with that. Now, they cannot diagnose all kinds of stuff that the neuropsychologist can, but they can go through and give a good look to see, is there a reading disorder present? Is there a speech disorder present? Some sort of language issue going on. They're not as thorough as that neuropsychologist, but they can tell you a lot, just like the speech and hearing clinic did for us. Like, they went through and they evaluated and they made sure there weren't hearing problems present first, which I like. That's smart. That makes sense. You want to check that first. But they will go through and they'll do a lot of good checks, and they'll issue the standard tests that are looked for the dyslexia and stuff, like Woodcock-Johnson tests and things like that. They'll probably go through a certain battery of tests, and that will give you a lot of info. And they certainly may decide to also refer you to the neuropsychologist, but it's a good step. That's a first step. That's probably going to be a whole lot cheaper than that neuropsychologist is at first. But again, you probably have to have a referral to go through and go that particular avenue from your doctor, depending on your insurance and all that. But you can call around and ask those questions. I do recommend the speech avenue because I think it's cheaper, but that's just me. That's probably because I had that experience with it, and I found it to be a positive experience, and I found it helpful. Now, that said, you don't have to get an evaluation. You really don't. Now, if your child is probably severely dyslexic and is going to need accommodations on things like the ACT and SAT, you need to think about it a little strategically. There is a lot that evaluation can tell you that's very useful, especially for homeschooling, to help you adjust your homeschool path. But in the same turn, if you need those accommodations later, you might want to wait. If you know that you're only going to want to pay for this once because it's so expensive, to get accommodations on those major tests, my understanding is they have to be within 3 years. So if you kind of wait and get the diagnosis done later, closer to time to do all that testing, that might come out a little financially better. But if you go ahead and do it because you're just not comfortable not knowing and not having a professional opinion, I totally understand, because that's kind of how I was feeling. I was feeling like, I'm our first time homeschool mama. Am I messing this up? Am I screwing it all up? Am I messing my son up for life? And that's your fear. You're like, this is not as easy as I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be way easier. But when you run into those struggles with dyslexia, you may need that next opinion to know, is it you? Is it what you're doing? Do you need to do a different method? What's going on? Because there is strength in the knowledge of knowing what's going on, and it can help you counter. But it's certainly possible, if you're a confident homeschool mama, that you can go out there, you can research heavily and obsessively and figure out, yeah, my kid is probably dyslexic. I don't know for sure, but we're going to go with this, and we're going to change our teaching style, and we're going to do what the other people do when they're trying to teach a dyslexic child. You can totally do that. You can research online, you can use YouTube, you can do all sorts of things. Figuring out the term Orton-Gillingham method helped me tremendously, because that is the proven method. Research that. Look it up on YouTube. Look how people are doing various drills. Look up curriculum that is based on that, and you will get much better curriculum. I will be linking below just some curriculums that I have used and I can recommend, or that I've heard of and can recommend. I will be linking to websites and stuff with information as well that were tremendously helpful to me in the learning process, so feel free to check out those links below. And again, I'm going to be going over some other videos and talking about the curriculums that I've used, kind of giving a review of them, but specifically with dyslexia in mind, how that's worked out for my dyslexic kiddos. So by all means, think about these things and don't feel defeated. If you feel like, wow, this is so much harder than I thought, I think my kid's dyslexic, I don't know if I can do this, my mother-in-law says that I'm terrible, I should never try to homeschool, and then homeschooling with dyslexia, that's just way out of my league. Realize, take a deep breath, go, think about it. Think before you go and automatically enroll in public school, because it's going to be much more difficult for your kid in public school than it is at home. No one is more invested in your child than you are. Trust me, you are going to be able to tackle this. All you have to do is take it one day at a time. I often think that song in my head, one day at a time, sweet Jesus, because believe me, I need it. If you just take each problem, say your child's trouble learning fractions, then research that, research ways to show fractions visually. Dyslexics are typically visual learners, sometimes auditory. Figure out your child's best method of learning. They like to be very hands-on. My children tend to need things like math manipulatives, so I've either DIY'd a lot of them or I've used Montessori versions of them. There's things that you can do, and I'm going to be sharing the things that I have done on future videos, but you may choose a different path. But don't feel like you can't do it, because I know that you probably can. It is overwhelming. You have days where you're like, blah. But it's really okay. You're not going to screw your kid up, because I'm not kidding. No one's more invested than you are in your child. You love your child. You want the best, and you're going to push and get them where they need to be. And they have to have a certain amount of tenaciousness too, and they'll get there. They'll get there because they probably want to please. They probably want to learn. They're probably not being lazy, because that's what a lot of people think. That's what I thought with my kid at first. I feel so bad, but it really wasn't laziness. It was just that was his learning struggle. So be tenacious, tackle it. Don't be afraid. Just realize that you're going to have to research. You're going to have to go out there and dig in, but it's very doable. There's a lot of help out there. I strongly recommend the Homeschooling Dyslexic Kids group. Very invaluable to me. I'm not the owner of that group on Facebook, but I am an admin. At least I am currently. So very much recommend that group. It's just been a blessing. It's that we try to keep it an encouraging place so that people aren't being mean to each other, but it's just, you learn so much there. And then when you have those days where you feel like giving up, that really helps a ton, trust me. But anyway, I think I've went through over all of the admin news. Let me double check my notes here. They disappeared on me. Public schoolers. Now, obviously, I'm not a public schooler. I went to public school as a kid, but I haven't had dealings with that in many years. If you have a child in public school, you're going to have to push for an evaluation. And the public school will probably eventually give you a free one if your child is not performing where they need them to. But I also see in those groups a lot of moms who end up getting that evaluation and it's not thorough or complete enough, and they end up paying out of pocket. So consider that. Another reason to consider homeschooling if you're able to. I know that's not easy for some of you, but if you can, it would make all the difference. But if you can't, try still researching and learning about this stuff and working with your child at night to try to help get them caught up, because odds are the tutoring they're getting at school is probably not really the right type of intervention. There's very few schools that do it and do it well and use some kind of Orton-Gillingham method. Very few. There's a few who do. I've heard some good things, but not by many, unfortunately. So it's something to consider. All in all, I already talked about the links. I'm looking through my notes here. If you have solutions that I have not mentioned, please mention them in the comments below, because it's entirely possible I have missed something that's glaringly obvious that maybe you know about that I don't. So please mention them so other people who watch this video can learn about that and be blessed by it. If you have any wisdom to share on the topic of homeschooling a dyslexic child, by all means share that too, because I am still very much a sponge who is trying to learn. I am not an expert. I'm just a mom. So I hope you guys take this info and I hope it blesses you in some way. If it didn't, if it was boring, I'm sorry. I will be doing probably quite a few videos on this topic because it's a very important topic and I think there's not enough info out there to suit my taste on it. Maybe it's because I'm voracious when it comes to that kind of thing, but anyway, I'm putting more info out there and what I've learned in hopes that it blesses someone else, and I hope you guys have an awesome day.